In this video, I will discuss my database and go over my API endpoints. In my MongoDB database, I have a user collection. This collection stores my user objects. Each user has an ID, name, email, password, balance, role, and transactions field. All 7 fields are stored between logins. The DAL, or the data application layer, is what directly communicates with the database. When the API gets a request, it then calls a specific function in the DAL. The DAL then requests information or instructs the database to perform the required task. The DAL is then responsible for relaying that information back to the API. I made 3 changes to the DAL in my application. The first was using a .env file so my database's username and password would be secure. I also added a role for designating a normal or admin user. And the last change was to add an empty array for storing past transactions. API, or Application Programming Interfaces, is a software interface that allows 2 or more computer programs to communicate with each other. In my application, I chose to use REST, or Representational State Transfer. This is my index.js file that holds all my API endpoints. It has an app listener listening on port 3000 for all incoming requests. The first API endpoint is the create user account. When it receives a request for the set URL, it first has the DAL call find, sending the email as a parameter. The find function in the DAL then returns the user. If there is a user, it will respond back saying that it already exists. If the user does not exist, then it will decode the password, and then bcrypt will hash that password. Once that's done, it will call the create function in the DAL with all the remaining parameters. Once the DAL sends that to the database to create that user, and then responds back with that user so that it can be sent back to the front end. The next one is login user. It's very similar in the way that it calls the find function in the DAL with the email. But since you're logging in, if the user doesn't exist, it tells you failed, the user's not found. If the user does exist, then it decodes the password and it uses decrypt compare to encode the password the user supplied and then check with the saved hash in the database. Only then will the user be allowed to log in, and that response is sent back to the front end. Then we have 2 find endpoints. You have DAL.find and find1. Find will return the user in an array, and find1 will just respond with the user as a single object. Next, you have the deposit or withdrawal. So when it has a request from this URL, it'll save the amount, it'll call the function update in the DAL which, depending on if it's a negative or a positive number, will increment the currently saved amount in the database, and then it will respond back with what was done. Last is the all accounts endpoint. This just returns all the accounts or users in an array.